had there. And then I went to Arizona to write a script. You know Rob Schneider? Yeah, he asked me, he's a nice guy, a very nice guy. He asked me to go and write a script. He's written a script about something that happened in Australia in 1932, which takes a little bit of believing. It's called the Great Emu War. And it was when the Australian Army had a war on the emus because they'd become so numerous and they were destroying all the crops of the farmers. And they called the army in, who were quite unable to kill them because they've got tiny little bodies and lots of very tough feathers on the top. So we made quite a funny script out of that, and I hope that we're making it later this year, but you never know, do you?
No, you never know, but fingers crossed. We'd love to see it, wouldn't we?
Yes, that'll be good. That'll be good. I think it'll be funny. And then what did I do then? Oh, yes, then I was offered a film. I haven't put this in the paper, so don't tell anyone, ha, ha, ha. I was offered a film with a guy that I'd made a film with in 2020 in Yorkshire, in York, and he asked me to make another film on the island of Nevis in the Caribbean. And I got a bit fed up with him, actually, because he was changing all the dates. Then he put the date of the film off for 4 weeks without having a decent explanation. And I found out he'd lied about the explanation. He just moved me on 4 weeks. I don't know what I was supposed to do in those 4 weeks. And eventually, I was trying to find a nice villa on Nevis, and he was sending me pictures of only 2 villas. He told me I'd have a huge selection, and they weren't very nice. And he said, "Why don't you like our beautiful villas?" And I said, "Well, Philippe, he was a frog. My God, he was fat. He looked like Mr. Equator. It was quite extraordinary. No, Mr. Creosote, Mr. Creosote. Yes, he really did look like it. And he had an ego to match." To match the stomach. And so I said to him, the reason I don't think these villas you're sending me are very beautiful, Philippe, is that you think they're beautiful, but only because you grew up in Marseille, which is not the most beautiful city in France. And I said, incidentally, I had a company that made management training films, and we made a very good film about delegation. Would you like me to send it to you? And he fired me. I was out of the movie at the age of 81. I'd finally been fired.
I think that deserves a round of applause. We love that. Amazing.
I thought that was a sign of distinction. You know, my admiration for people always goes up when I hear that they were expelled from school. You know, I like those kind of people. I like weird, difficult people. I also like Michael Palin, but, you know, you're allowed a few exceptions.
Yeah, we'll come to him. And I feel very distinguished that I actually got expelled from school. So I've come
Congratulations, congratulations. I wish I'd have the courage to be expelled from school. It makes you interesting, doesn't it? But people always say, why haven't they offered you a knighthood? Because if Palin's worth a knighthood, do you know what he got his for? Geography.
Took him 80 days.
No mention of comedy. He got it because he did those travel programs. Those most appallingly dull things I've ever seen in my life, you know? What's the name of that thing when you can't go to sleep? What's that called?
Insomnia.
Yes, they are actually sponsored, Michael's travel programs, by the Insomnia Association of America, because the only people who've never slept in their lives sit down to watch episode 1 and are fast asleep after about 7 minutes, you know. I love that, man, but we tease each other rotten. I put out a tweet yesterday. I said, I had lunch with Michael Palin last week. I haven't spoken to him for 2 years. I don't like to interrupt him.
Oh, we will definitely be coming on to Michael Palin a little bit later.
Yes, we'll do him down for sure.
We love it. But throughout lockdown as well, you have, as you just mentioned, that you put out a tweet about Michael Palin. You have really taken to be a social influencer on Twitter.
Well, I was introduced to an influencer in LA, and he was this rather undistinguished, not very confident-looking 32-year-old. And I said, well, what do you do? He said, I influence people. And I said, well how do you influence them? And he said, well, I tell them what to buy. And I thought, what does he know that I don't know? Isn't it an extraordinary world now? This person is an influencer. They say, go and buy this kind of face cream. It used not to be as mad as this. I want the young people to know it's a lot madder now than it ever was when I was young.
Oh, absolutely. From you guys, would you like to hear a little bit of unpolitical correctness? Shall we go off it? When I mention the name of another Twitter influencer that seems to have caught your eye, one Piers Morgan. What are your opinions on Piers?
Well, it just shows the state this country is in, that he should be chosen all the time to present programs. I mean, the idea that there are not thousands of people out there who would do it better is ridiculous. He's like a lot of people who get a lot of attention from the press. He is an attention hog. He wants lots and lots and lots of attention. He's like Richard Branson. You know Branson? The guy who always looks as though he's a sort of alpha baboon in a headwind. Right? And he's a billionaire. Oh, that's good. I'm not much interested in billionaires because my experience of life is that the only way to make a lot of money is to do all the things that other people find too boring. You know? It's very boring making money. Very boring indeed. I should have done more of it, actually, because I'm worth practically nothing now. You know, I had a divorce a few years ago from my third wife, Alice Faye. She got 20 million. 20 million. Now, the trouble about a court telling you got to pay your ex-wife 20 million is that when you paid her 10, you have another 10 to go. Then you give her another 5, and you got 5 to go. So I'm impoverished. That's why I'm here doing sort of seedy little appearances in grotty little clubs like that.
And aren't we glad that he is? Oh, we love that, John. We will come on to family life a little bit later on when you can touch on that. But shall we start with your early career? Shall we have a little look?
We can, yes.
As our screen changes a little bit from Days of the Frost Reports and the class sketch.
Well, this is the first television I ever really did that attracted any attention. 1966, if you could imagine that. Shortly after the Second World War. David, Ronnie Barker, Ronnie Corbett, Sheila Stiefel, who was very good, and a lovely American girl who sang called Julie Felix. Julie actually sang the most boring song that I've ever heard. It was called We're All Going to the Zoo Tomorrow. Zoo tomorrow, zoo tomorrow. We're all going to the zoo, zoo, zoo. We're all going to the zoo tomorrow, zoo. Graham Chapman and I were in a restaurant once where they had little jukeboxes. And some very upper-class people came in and made a lot of noise at a table over there. And Graham and I had finished the meal, so we put every, whatever it was, florin or shilling into this and pressed the I'm going to the zoo tomorrow button 17 times. And left them. But that was 66 and 67. And then in 67, I palled up with these guys. Now, I'd known, that's me at the top. Then there's Graham Chapman. We'd been at Cambridge together. We started writing together. And a guy down there was very famous for a time. He was called Marty Feldman. And Marty used to be the script editor on the Frost Report. And that was all he was. He was a writer on the Frost Report. And when David came to me and said, David Frost said, I want to give you your own show. Who do you want to be in it? I said, well, Tim Brooke Taylor down at the bottom there, because we were in the same show in Cambridge that got us all into show business, Graham, and Marty Feldman. And David said, but Marty's not an actor. He's a performer. He's just a writer. I said, you just trust me. He's going to become a star. And David said, but what about the way he looks? He was a bit of a frightener in the dark, I have to tell you. But he was very funny. He went to America, worked with Mel Brooks. So that took me to 67. And then at 67, I started writing for Peter Sellers, which I'm quite proud of. I don't know if Peter's up there. No. Oh, that was the famous sketch, the class sketch. I look down on him and he looks up to me and all this kind of thing. Oh, and that's the 1948 show, which we started 2 years later because I didn't want to write for a bit because I just got married to Connie and I didn't want to leave Connie in a London flat when she didn't know London very well. So I said to Graham, can we just write for a bit? And it suited Graham because Graham was training as a doctor at St. Bart's. And so we wrote for Peter Sellers, and he was at that time the #1 comedy actor in the world. He's done Pink Panther, and he'd done a wonderful comedy called Dr. Strangelove. Now, younger people, do you know Dr. Strangelove? You do? It's wonderful, wonderful, wonderful comedy. So he was absolutely at the top of his game. And Gray and I used to write for them, and then on Thursday afternoon, we used to watch a kids program, which was called Do Not Adjust Your Set, and it had in it Michael Palin, Eric, Terry Jones, and Terry Gilliam's cartoons for the first time. Very simple ones in those days. And after a time, I said to Graham, why don't we get together with these guys? And we knew them because we'd all written stuff for the Frost Report. And they said, okay. And then we went off to the BBC and had the most extraordinary meeting with the guy who was in charge of comedy. Do you know about this, Michael Mills?
No, tell me all about Michael Mills.
Well, Michael Mills ran comedy at the BBC. And a fellow who used to write with Marty Feldman called Barry Took got us a meeting at the BBC with him to see about doing a series. So we trooped into his office and he said, sit down. And we knew him a tiny bit. And he said, so I understand you guys would like to do a series for the BBC. And we said, well, we'd love to, Mr. Mills, please. And he said, well, what are you thinking of doing? And there was a long silence because we hadn't actually discussed it. Can you believe that? We went in there to try and get a comedy series, and we'd never actually discussed what we were going to do. So we tried to sort of put on a show. We said, well, we're going to do a comedy program with humorous material and jokes intended to make people laugh, with the intention of making people laugh and being hilarious and amusing them. And he looked at us as though we were mad, which we were. And he said, well, you're going to have guest stars. And we said, are we going to have... No, probably not. He said, well, what about music? We said, well, we haven't really discussed music. And then he said, film. We said, oh, yes, we'll have some film. That's a really good idea. Yes, we'll do some film. And I sat there. I've never been so embarrassed in my life. I realized we're making complete fools of ourselves. And this was our big chance to get a big series. And there was an embarrassed silence. And he said, oh, go away and make 13 programs. Now, if you knew anything about television today, you would know how extraordinary that was. Because he simply trusted us. He suddenly thought, I don't know what these guys are going to do. If it had been today, they would have asked you for a detailed synopsis of the first 36 programs you were going to make. Not that the people in charge have any idea what they're doing. We have to be clear about this. The people in charge of television companies and films have no idea what they're doing. And the reason is they've never written, they've never directed, and they probably haven't produced, and they certainly haven't performed. But despite the fact that they can't write, can't perform, and can't direct, they give lots of instructions to people who can. And this is the way the world's set up. Do you see what I mean? So you have people in charge of the film business who have no understanding of creativity at all. And there's nothing you can do about it. I was telling Tom that one woman, I'd written a script for her. She was with Disney, Nina Jacobson, and she said, this first draft is really good. It's 75% of the way there. We have some notes. She gave me 6 notes. I went away, I had a break, I came back, I rewrote it, I improved the ending. I took the notes into consideration, handed it in, and the next thing I knew, they were looking for new writers. I said, well, what's going on? They said, well, you didn't incorporate the other notes that we sent you later. And I said, well, can I see them? I never saw them. So I looked at them. And she said, so we want you to make all those changes to the script. And I said, you know, I can't do this. And she said, why not? I said, because I would want to make the film better. And if I do your changes, it will be worse. So I don't think I should do it, because you're not looking to make it better. You just want to make it worse. There's something quite refreshing about being able to say things like that to people in comedy. And it's much easier, actually, as you get older. You see, when you're young, you're trying to behave well and impress everyone. And as you get older, I can assure you, you don't give a fuck. It's wonderful. And it's very liberating. I was talking to a top London lawyer about 3 days ago. His name was John Cohen, and I was trying to figure out a deal, and he sent me the most ridiculous thing. Just, you know, he was trying to get the rights for the thing I'm doing at the moment, which is a stage version of Life of Brian, which I think is going to be quite exciting. And I said, can I get some money up front so that I could just stop and actually write this? And they offered me some money, but then they sent the contract, and they wanted all the rights, all the planetary rights, all the rights to the solar system in eternity, for the small amount of money they were giving me outright. This lawyer, John Cohen, rang me up and said, well, which are the issues on which we differ? And I said, well, I don't want to give you every right that could possibly exist in eternity in exchange for a small sum of money. And there was a silence, and I said, well, nice to talk to you, now fuck off. And I'm sure it's the only time in his life he was told to fuck off. And it's great fun getting old, because you see, it doesn't matter, because you're going to be dead soon. So
I think that deserves a round of applause as well.
You don't have to clap. I'm not trying to make you clap. I'm trying to make you smile and laugh.
I'm trying to make him clap.
I know you are. Now shut up. What else?
Oh, you segued very nicely from talking about Graham and meeting the others into a series of amazing TV programs that I'm sure a lot of you here today are really interested in. Do you want to throw it up on screen as we discuss the Monty Pythons? There we go. Take a little look.
Well, there they all are. Now, as you know, 2 of them are dead.
4 to go.
4 to go, yes. My wife suggested, when we were doing the O2 show, Terry Jones was still alive, and my wife was the one who suggested the title of 1 down, 5 to go. But it's now 2 down and 4 to go, and I wouldn't put much money on either Idle or Gilliam living much later, much longer. I wouldn't, they're not, what are they? Not a well man. So I think that he'll be gone in a couple of years, and I think, Gilliam is quite mad, and will probably go in the next 2 or 3 years. So there'll only be me and Michael left. And if I can outlive Michael, I will be able to go on tour, and I'll be able to call myself Monty Python, because the other 5 will be dead, you see, and I'll be able to take all the money. So I like Michael, but I do hope he dies before I do.
Oh, we love that. So on the basis of the five of you, what is the silliest thing that you've done together as a group? What is the stupidest
The single silliest thing, because we once were sitting at dinner and we said, what's the silliest thing we've ever done? And it was unanimous. Who's going to guess? Yes! The fish slapping dance, which is so wonderfully meaningless, you know? We can't show it or anything, can we? No, but it's Michael slapping me with a fish, and then I hit him with a huge fish, and he falls in the water. It's absolutely meaningless, and it makes me laugh every time I see it. It is just wonderful. And funnily enough, sometimes the really funny things are the things that don't really mean anything. You know, most jokes have a sort of a meaning, but, you know, there's a moment in Life of Brian when dear old Graham is talking to the crowd and he says, you're all individuals, you know, and they say, yes, we're all individuals. And then one person says, I'm not. It's terribly funny, but it doesn't mean anything. I've been trying to understand it for years. I'm not. And they all go, shh.
It's one of my favourite lines in Life of Brian. I loved it. And
the other one I love is the man who has been blind and throws the stick away and says, I've been blind for 40 years and now I could see, and he falls into a huge pit.
I introduced my son to Life of Brian last week, and he is captivated by it, so we'll have to show him the Holy Grail. What do you think? The Holy Grail? Which one do you prefer?
Oh, no, the Grail's much easier because it's just silly. I mean, kids love the Grail, but you have to know a little bit about the history of religion before you can laugh at Life of Brian, you know. And I love Life of Brian. I think I mentioned I'm trying to adapt it now into a stage play, but not a musical, because I think if you have songs, have you ever seen a musical that was really funny? They're always called a musical comedy. But what's the funniest musical comedy you ever saw? I'm asking because I'm curious. Life of Brian, yes, but it's not a musical. Book of Mormon was wonderful. Yeah, the Book of Mormon was absolutely wonderful. That's quite right. Most of the time, if you make a musical, you see the choreographers and the musical director take over because they think this is our territory. And then the dances get longer and longer and longer as the choreographer thinks of more and more ideas, and the songs get longer and longer. So you can't keep the pace up, which is essential for a comedy. You see what I mean? So we just, we're writing very, very, very short songs, just two verses. And so that the characters will go into a short, sharp, funny song and then continue with the action. I don't think anyone's ever tried that before. That's what we're trying to do. And I've changed a lot of it at the end. Don't tell the newspapers this, but I have Pontius Pilate apologizing for the crucifixion of Christ and saying things like, let's face it, mistakes were made. I love those American apologies, you know what I mean? When they massacred someone and they say, oh, awfully sorry if anything I've done might have caused the slightest inconvenience to anyone. That kind of apology. And I'm having a lot of fun with that. And I made Governor Pontius Pilate's wife a Christian. And she's explaining to him about Christianity and does he have to crucify people? The centurions actually, when they say to Brian, take him away and crucify him, the centurions said, well, we can't, sir. And he says, why? What is this? Insubordination? He says, no, sir, we haven't got the wood. It was supposed to be delivered on Tuesday, but the horse died, so... And I love this because, well, I think it's great to go back into history sometimes and think, well, what really happened, you know? And when they're listening at the beginning of Life of Brian to the beautiful Sermon on the Mount, and they're saying, oh, blessed are the cheesemakers, you know. there would have been people there who couldn't quite hear what Christ was saying. You see, that's the reality of it. And that's what's so funny. If you could go back there and say, well, what were people saying? What were they really doing? Because we always get a sanitized version of everything in history from as a myth. I mean, I'm writing a book at the moment called 1776 and a half, about the American independence, wars of independence. And you know why they won.
Go on, tell me.
Well, the French won it for them. The French were so pissed off with us because in 1759 we took Canada and India off the French in the same year. Take that, froggies. Why do the French have so many civil wars? So that they can win one now and again. How many men does it take to defend Paris? We don't know. It's never been tried.
Have we got any French people in tonight? Oh,
Oh, yes, but that's not proper French. Well, the French say it isn't proper French. They laugh at you Canadians and your terrible accent. Yeah, that's right. I'd much rather have Canadians any day. I love Canadians. They were so polite. Do you know how you get 200 Canadians to jump into an ice-cold swimming pool? You just say, jump in the pool, please. Yes, they say thank you before they jump. I love the Canadians. The only thing I'm not crazy about is the food. I mean, no one has ever opened a Canadian takeaway, have they? Right? No? I mean, I don't know what they'd serve. What would they? Beaver's tails. Beaver's tails, excellent. In maple syrup. Right? Yes. And moose is the other one. And that is why the Americans, looking north, thinking, well, there's nothing much there in the way of exotic cuisine, and then they look down to Mexico, and they think Mexican cuisine is a proper cuisine, you know? And I'm told that Mexican food can be eaten, but only in an emergency. And I said that once, and of course I got into a lot of trouble because Americans are quite happy to insult British food, but you mustn't insult Mexican food because the Mexicans are so weak and pathetic. That's what all this PC is about. It's about condescension. It's saying, oh, we can make jokes about Germans and Australians and Belgians. We can't make jokes about little people who have their feelings hurt because they're not strong or tough enough to look after themselves. So we must be offended on their behalf, despite the fact they're probably not offended themselves. Do you find it easy to be offended, you people? No, exactly. And now I'm afraid our woke friends. I wrote a poem the other day. Yesterday I met a woke. It simply couldn't take a joke. That's all there is, I'm afraid. It's a very... But I think the idea that the wokes, that they have to look after other people because other people can't look after themselves. So the wokes have to come along and say, please, look after, we're going to look after you. Well, I spent a lot of time with Mexicans when I lived in Santa Barbara for 10 years, and they seemed to be an absolutely splendid group. They were much happier than the whites. Much happier. And they were fun and relaxed, and they knew how to live. You know, it didn't seem to me they were in need of help. Actually, I do have a nice Mexican joke. It's a U.S. Navy patrol vessel is on patrol in the Gulf of Mexico. And they're wondering, is there anything going on? They see something over there, and they go over, and there's two little Mexicans in the boat rowing like hell towards America. And they say, hey, guys, hang on a moment. What's going on? The Mexicans say, oh, we're invading America. And he says, what, just the two of you? And the Mexicans say, oh, no, we're the last ones. The others are already there. Now, you see, some people would say, You can't tell a joke about Mexicans. What I love about that one is the Mexicans win. Do you see what I mean? They come out of it well. So I think this stuff about political correctness and wokeness is killing the civilization. I mean, the one thing I've always been proud of in England was our sense of humor. And how can you make jokes without offending people like this? Because every joke that's ever made, unless it's a pun, is critical. You don't laugh at people who are perfect, right? If somebody's behaving appropriately the whole time, like Christ, you can't laugh at that. You only laugh when people's behavior is inappropriate. So laughter is always, in a sense, critical, but it's not necessarily unkind because it's critical, because you know that we all tease each other. When I see Palin, the first thing I do is tease him about boring travel program and his knighthood. But that kind of teasing is very affectionate. You see it all the time. If you go into a changing room of any sports event, that's what all the men and women are doing. They're teasing each other, and that's a bonding mechanism. And people think, no, it's critical and therefore it's nasty. Well, it can be nasty, and nasty jokes are just nasty. We don't do them. But all these other jokes, you know, like, what's the other one? Oh, the other, I can't do that because it's this is, I'm going to ask you to take the microphone. This is a joke the French make about the Belgians. They say, why do the Belgians have their windshield wipers on the inside of the windshield? How can you tell that a Greek aeroplane has landed at the airport? Because it has hair under both wings.
The way that we're on a world tour as well. So we've been to Greece, we've been to Canada, we've been to Mexico. I brought you back to England as well with a bit of British afternoon tea. But seeing as we're doing the loop, do you remember what it was like filming in Scotland? Have we got any Scots in? Good. Tell them all about Scott. Oh, we got a few.
I love the Scots, you know. There were two taxis collided in Aberdeen. 35 people were hurt. Sex in Edinburgh is what the cold comes in, right? Yes, this was a miserable experience. I hated every. No, it's not quite true, because I discovered white Chardonnay. I discovered French Chardonnay, and it's the only thing that came out of that film, apart from the film, because we made this film, and I think it was a 6 or 7 when it. I mean, I just want you to think we made this for £240,000. £240,000. And we were in Scotland in April, and the only month to be in Scotland is September. Am I right? Yeah, well, September's okay. The rest of the time, the poor people have the most terrible, terrible, terrible weather. And we would get on the mountainside every morning with this ridiculous knitted string, and it would rain. And we had about 4 umbrellas between about 40 of us, so we got damp. But it didn't matter because we were young, and we deserved punishment for being young, you know. Hate young people with their hair and their flat stomachs. Hope they get uncurable diseases. So we did this miserable film, and Graham was in recovery from alcoholism and was very much on the edge. And the very first shot of the whole film, the gears sheared off on the camera, so we didn't even get the first shot till they got another camera, which took 4 hours while we stood in the rain. It was just horrible. But Jones and Gilliam directed it, and Jones is much better at comedy. Gilliam is wonderful visually, and I've asked him to help me make sure that the Life of Brian stage version looks wonderful. He's agreed to do that. But Jonesy was very, very good at directing this stuff, and we made a very nice film in the end. But it was just goes to show that People don't understand filming, and we couldn't get the money even originally, and somebody got all the rock groups to do it. Pink Floyd, they had money in it.
Yeah, they did.
And
George Harrison had money in Life of Brian.
Life of Brian. Well, that was an extraordinary story, because I told you that nobody in charge of films or television knows what they're doing. I mean, it was very hard to raise £240,000 for this film, you know? But when we did the next one, which was Life of Brian, we went round all the studios in England, and nobody was interested. It was going to cost £2 million to do it, and nobody was interested. So we went over to America, and we went around every studio in America, and no studio in America wanted to make Life of Brian. Recently voted Best British Comedy of all time. Not a single person wanted to make it. Can you believe that? Just extraordinary. And so Peter Sellers had asked me to go to Vienna to be in a film with him, and I said I'd love to. And then Eric Idle rang me up and said, don't go to Vienna, John. We've got the money for the film. And I said, what are you talking about? He said, George Harrison is going to put the money up. He was a friend of George's, and he'd given a script to George. And George had fallen out of bed because he laughed so much. And he rang Eric the next day, and he said, I'll put the money off. And Eric says, what do you mean? He said, I'll mortgage the house. I'm going to put the money off. And Eric said, but that's wonderful, but why? He said, I want to see the movie. Isn't that wonderful? Bless you, George. Without George, that film would not have been made, because the people in the church, the people at the top don't have a fucking clue what they're doing. Mind you, it's true of politics, as I'm sure you've noticed. What?
Oh, it's fine. Feel free. You carry on.
Well, no, I mean, you realize now that this country is in a complete mess, don't you? And I don't know what we're going to do about it, because we used to have some decent, educated people in charge who were decent. Any lying, egotistical, greedy bastard can screw up any system. But if you've got decent people in charge, capitalism works. It's only when you have horrible, greedy people like billionaires around and trying to everything becomes about money, then all the values are lost. It's a perfectly good system. Otherwise, you know, we want decent people in charge. We do not have decent people at the moment. You know, Boris Johnson was fired for lying from jobs, not on one occasion, but two. And it's very special to have a prime minister who was twice fired from his job for lying. Don't you know? There are not too many people around who could claim that. It's just amazing. And the worst thing now, and I know this from my own, I'm being quite serious from my own experience, which is that if you criticize the press and say that we should introduce Leveson 2, which would mean that if they told a lie, they would have to print a correction the same size and with the same prominence as the original lie. They don't want to do that. They really don't want to do that. And they say that would be infringing the freedom of the press, you know, their freedom to tell lies and make inaccurate statements. We mustn't infringe that, folks. That would be a loss of the rule of law, you know. And there's a guy called Peter Oborn who's written a book called Assault on Truth, which is about the actual conspiracy that's now between Number 10 and the right-wing press, because they give them a favorable, always, because they know perfectly well if the Conservatives lose power, they will bring Leveson 2 in, because all the other parties, without any exception at all, would implement Leveson 2. So the Tories have got to stay in there, so they do a deal. They do a deal. They say we won't say rude, critical things about the right-wing press won't say rude, critical things about Number 10, and in exchange, Number 10 refuses to implement Leveson 2, which David Cameron actually said he would implement. He actually said the victims of press abuse, and he said to them, we will implement this, and then Theresa May sent Matt Hancock into the House of Commons to lie about it. It's just unbelievably corrupt. And my friend Peter Oborn, who wrote a book about the conspiracy between the right-wing press and Number 10, he now can't get a job in British journalism. It's like Russia. Russia used to be like this. You know, if you wrote the wrong things, you were out of a job. Now that's got to this country. So I don't know what we're going to do about it. Do you?
I've no idea.
Well, what are you doing there then if you can't contribute to the...
I was going to say we're on the same page because I was going to touch on Boris Johnson a little bit later on when we play our word association game. So at least it gives you...
Use a sanitizer afterwards.
Well, we've got lots of it in stock, so we should be we should be able to. But seeing as we are non-discriminatory and we will offend everybody, we've touched on the British, we've touched on the Mexicans, we've touched on the Scottish. Anything to say about the Welsh?
The Welsh? I've heard of the Welsh.
Once, twice.
No, I know all about the Welsh because we had Terry Jones. Where's Terry Jones? That one. Where's Terry? There. He was Welsh. I used to have terrible rows with him. Because, you know, I said to him when we first got together, I explained to Terry that the Welsh are a subject race who have been put on the planet to carry out menial tasks for the English. And he couldn't get his mind around that. He used to argue with me. In fact, the hilarious thing was he really expected me to treat him as an equal. Can you believe that? Can you believe that? Oh, no. I had an interruption once in a show. I told exactly that story. And from the balcony, somebody in America shouted out, "Fuck off!" I said, "Is that the only English you can speak?"
I love that. Shall we have a little look more about the other pythons? Let's fight. There you all are. Beautiful. Now, who was your favourite other python to play alongside in sketches?
Well, this guy, Palin. I mean, the best sketches I ever did were with Palin. Palin's a wonderful, wonderful actor. And, oh, God, he used to annoy me on stage because he could always break me up. He would always ad-lib when we were doing a show on stage. And after you've done a show on stage about 10 times, you know the lines so well that you don't have to worry about forgetting them. And we were doing the parrot sketch as an encore in New York City at the city center. And he's got this knack of breaking me up by ad-libbing. And he came back on you'd gone to look and see if he had a live parrot. He came back and he said, "We're fresh out of parrot, Squire." I said, "I see, I get the picture." He says, "I've got a slug." And I say, "Does it talk?" You see? And he's supposed to say, "Not really," but that night he said, "Well, it's muttering a bit tonight." And I laughed so much that when I straightened my face and I turned back to him, I had completely forgotten where we were in the script. And I was so relaxed, I turned to the audience and I said, "What's the next line?" And about 400 of them shouted the right line out. And I said, "This is ridiculous. You pay good money to see me perform, and you know the fucking sketch better than I do." And then I said, "Come up on stage and do it with Michael." But there were so many of them. I said, "All right, stay in your seats." And we solved it very simply. Michael did his lines, and these 400 guys did my lines, and I just conducted them. It was... What's your excuse? What?
Childcare.
Child, have you got one? Oh, they're awful, aren't they? I say, people don't realize that most of the misery in the world is caused by children. Because, right? You worry yourself sick about them. They cost a fortune, and then they grow up like their mothers. I've got two, but they're the right ages. They're 51 and 37, you see. Still asking for money, but never mind. Children.
We love that. Thank you so much for coming. That material was just seamless, beautiful. We love that. So talking about sketching, we're talking about the Dead Parrot sketch.
So we're talking about Dead Parrot, and I was very cross with Michael because he made me laugh on stage, and he was always doing it, but I really got him back once because the BBC rang me up. They said, I've got an idea for you and Palin. And I said, that sounds amusing. I'll ask him. So I rang up his house, and his dear wife, they'd been married since 1966. Can you imagine that? A marriage lasting that long? I mean, how does one make a marriage last that long? I mean, what do you say when you wake up in the morning? Oh, hello, you again? Yeah. You must tell me all about yourself. I mean, oh, dear. Anyway, Helen answered the phone. I said, Helen, I want to ask Michael something. And Helen said, well, he's not here. He's away doing one of those fucking boring travel programs. And I said, well, where is he? And she said, he's in Helsinki. And they gave me the telephone number of the hotel. So I rang him up after dinner. I thought he'd be back now in his room, and I rang him up. And there was a long pause, and I thought myself, not only does he not know who this is, he doesn't know where I am. So when he answered, I said, hello? I said, hello, is that Mr. Michael Palin? And he said, yes. And I said, I introduced myself. My name is Lars Lindqvist. I'm a television producer for NRK. That's the Norwegian television service. Good evening. He said, good evening. I said, I'm wondering if I could do an interview with you. He said, oh, no, I'm awfully sorry. I'm leaving first thing in the morning. I said, no, not in the morning. Could we do an interview with you now? And he said, now? And I said, yes, I'm downstairs in the lobby of your hotel with the film crew. Would you like to come down, please, and do an interview with us? And he said, well, I'm in my pajamas. I said, the Norwegian audience would think that was very witty if you did the interview in your pajamas. Could you come down, please, and answer a few questions, Mr. Palin? He said, no, I'm not going to come down. It's too late. And I said, Mr. Palin, I said, it's so important. Please come down and do the interview. And he said, why is it so important? And I said, because the program is a tribute to Mr. John Cleese, and the most famous comedian in the world. And it's absolutely essential that we interview one of his helpers. And then I said, Michael, it's me. And I promise you, he laughed for 20 minutes. I got him so perfectly on one occasion.
That could have been a sketch. That could have been a Python sketch.
Could have been a Python sketch. He's a lovely, lovely guy. Very fond of him.
Love it. Now, speaking of Python sketches, can we have our next slide, please, where we can see some
that's
of the
not
classics.
Dead, it's resting. Yes, well, that's the old sketch. I love that sketch, but I prefer the cheese shop. Do you know the cheese shop? I love the cheese shop. It's such a stupid sketch. And I was never sure if it was going to be funny. And when we started reading it out at the read-through that we had on regular occasions, there was a bit of a silence at the beginning. I thought, oh, God, it's not going down. So did you have any gorgonzola? No, I'm afraid the van didn't come today. And all those excuses. And I thought to myself, oh dear, I'm dying a death up here. And then Michael started to laugh. And it had just hit that funny bone that gets hit every 5 years. And he laughed so much, he literally slipped off his chair onto the floor and lay there rolling around. He couldn't even get up. So for that reason alone, I think I like the cheese shop better than any other sketch.
I love the cheese shop, and I love the fish slapping.
There's the fish slapping dance. That's right.
Made sure that the fish slapping had a nice pride of place in our backlot, because that's one of my personal favourites.
And you can watch that time and again, and it's still funny, and I don't understand it, because basically the problem with a comedian is that if I tell you a joke, right, and you laugh, and I then tell you the same joke again, it doesn't go down very well. The musicians play a beautiful song and then play it again, and everyone loves it. You see what I mean? I was always jealous of comedians, but now we're getting to the point, which has only happened in my lifetime, when people learn the dialogue from sketches and films, and they can do it all. It started with, what was that musical? It started with the Rocky Horror Show. The Rocky Horror Picture, when people would go into that little theater in Chelsea and would actually take umbrellas and put them up at a certain stage of the film. But this is something completely new, and I don't quite understand people learning sketches. Don't get it, but I'm very pleased they do.
I'm very pleased they do it. It shows that devotion and love to a particular comedian or a particular group that just creates such wonderful memories for them that they have to replicate it. And I love.
Well, people tell me, I mean, families say that they largely converse in the best-known lines from Fawlty Towers.
Excellent.
You know, my wife has made a mistake. You know, that sort of stuff. And it's fascinating there. It's very strange that Fawlty Towers thing, because when it started off, nobody could quite make it out. It doesn't seem anything like unusual now, but for the very first series, it wasn't particularly well received, and then it was very, very well liked after we got on to the second series. But the first series, I was in a therapy group, because my very first marriage with Connie, and we wrote Fawlty Towers together, it was going wrong, and we went to see a psychiatrist who specialized in sort of marital stuff. And it was a couples group, and one of the new members of the group once was a judge. And being a judge, of course, he'd not heard of me or Monty Python or Fawlty Towers. And when he learned, he said, "Oh, I must watch it. I'll watch it this week." And he watched it, and when we got together again, we said to him, "Well, what did you think of it, Fawlty Towers?" And he said, "I have never been so embarrassed in my life." He was just so embarrassed by the situations, and he told us the following thing, which strikes me as extraordinary. He said, "I became so embarrassed that I stood up and left the room." Now, I can understand him turning it off, but why would he go out of the room? Probably because he's a judge, right? And he said he stood outside the room listening to it. And then he wanted to know how it ended, so he went back into the room, but watched it to the end, but without sitting down. This is the man who is sentencing people to years in jail. And I thought that was funny, because there's always some people who can't laugh at something because of their own psychological makeup. And you can always find, I mean, the World Wildlife Fund once wrote to me and said, we're doing, to raise some funds, we're doing a book of celebrities' recipes. Will you send me a recipe for the World Wildlife Fund recipe book? And I sent them a recipe for poached giant panda. They didn't think it was at all funny. Not even the snow leopard sauce. So you can always get into some areas where people get so embarrassed. But I love the fact that this judge couldn't bear it and couldn't just sit there and watch it.
I love the way that we segued into Fawlty Towers, because that is exactly where we're going to next. Are you ready? Pop. Oh, how good was that? There we go.
Well, there's dear Connie, and we were married in '68, and we were together about 10 years, and then we broke up. It was very painful for us both, and in the end, Connie was much keener to to separate than I was. But I think it was the right decision, at least for her. And we wrote the first episode of Fawlty Towers when we were married, and the second after we got divorced, which rather puzzled people, but we still get on very well. And there's a lovely coincidence that the first time I ever saw Connie on stage was at a small production somewhere in Pennsylvania, and she was on stage with Bert Lahr, who had been the Cowardly Lion in the Wizard of Oz. And she was great. She stood toe to toe with him, and they were both very funny. And I always remembered that. And then when she married a second time, she married Bert Lahr's son, John Lahr, who was a very, very good writer about the theater. And so they've been married happily for a long time. And he was the New York theater critic for a long time. So I always thought that was a rather sweet little story. This is Andrew. I saw Andrew on stage in an Alan Bennett play, and I thought, who is this guy? Because he's just wonderful. The play was called Habeas Corpus, and it had Alec Guinness in it. And I just thought he was wonderful, so I put him in a couple of small films that I was making. And every time he did a beautiful performance, no matter how different it was from what he did last time. So I immediately said, he has to do Manuel. And if you met him now, you wouldn't think he could possibly be Manuel. He's not with us anymore, I'm afraid. He had dementia and died some time ago. But he was a very quiet, almost studious guy. And then if you put a moustache on him, he turned into Manuel, and it was quite extraordinary to watch. It was clever man with a sly sense of humor. Now, you'll never guess which city he was born in. Berlin. Yes, Berlin, and he was Jewish, was Jewish. So he managed to get out in the mid-30s in time. But if you met him, he was the perfect English gentleman. You would have thought he might have been in charge of a library or something like that. Slightly academic, but very quiet. We put the moustache on him, and he was wonderful. And Prunella, of course, is just terrific. I mean, she's a wonderful comedy actress. And when I show clips, I'm always amazed at how good her timing is. And she was almost as old as I am, because I used to watch her in something with Richard Bryars before I'd gone into the business. I can't remember what it was called. They were very good together. Richard Bryars? Anyway, she's a wonderful performer, and I'm very fond of her, and she's married to Timothy West, who's another very, very good performer. There's Basil over there, based on the guy, Donald Sinclair, who actually ran Gleneagles Hotel. The Pythons went to stay there because we were filming on the south coast. We were filming near Torquay, and we went in there and stayed at the hotel. And the others, with the exception of Eric and Connie, left after 2 days because the hotel was so absolutely awful. But he was wonderful because he was not just, you know how some people are rude, and he was just gratuitously rude. He was gloriously rude just to everyone, unless they were upper class. And there was something quite fascinating about him because, for example, one day when Eric and I had stayed on in the hotel, we put down our briefcases, and then the car came to take us filming because it was late, and we both forgot the briefcases. And when we got back in the evening, we said, he was sitting at the desk, and so we went up and said, excuse me. Oh, what? You know, so we left the briefcase. Yes. They're over there behind the white wall, and he pointed out at the front door of the hotel. And there was a swimming pool then and a white wall about 70 yards away. I looked at her, I said, excuse, what do you want now? I said, well, why do you put it behind the white wall? And he said, I thought it might be a bomb. And this was before the IRA had started bombing again. It was that long ago, and we both said to him, "A bomb?" And he said, "We've had some staff problems recently."
Oh, can we have a massive round of applause for Basil Fawlty? Well, we've come to that time of the show, and we've literally scratched the surface on so many different topics, and there's more to go. But we are going to open up the floor to all of you. Now, it's always nice to get some interesting, different questions. So we've got some of our team that are going to be coming around with a boom mic. So please feel free. If you have a question to pose to our national treasure, please feel free, raise your hands, and let's see exactly.
It's so much better if they're rude questions. We've got to go to, because are those questions about how, like you get in California, is how wonderful you are, Mr. Cleese, how can I be as wonderful as you? So nice rude questions. Yes, there's a gentleman here.
We're just waiting on the boom mic.
Oh, let's wait for the boom mic.
In fact, while we're waiting on the boom mic, how about I go down and see him? Hello, sir. How are you? Stand up. Your name is?
Jason. John,
yes.
We spoke about political correctness.
Yeah.
It's a great disappointment to me that you didn't take Ashdown's peerage. Do you ever regret it, given that you might shake up those?
No, I was tempted when he offered me a peerage. I was tempted largely because I thought it would have annoyed the other Pythons so much, you know. I thought them having to address me as Lord Cleese in the script meetings, but it meant being here in the winter. They wanted me to be here to vote in the House of Lords, so I refused to be here in the winter. I think spending the winter in England costs you about 2 years of your life every time you do it. So I passed on that, and I really don't mind, because I've come to the conclusion that on the whole, those kind of things are really rather silly. And, you know, there's so many felons in the House of Lords now. I mean, if you were actually in the House of Lords, you'd be sitting next to people like Conrad Black and Jeffrey Archer, you know, who've done time. And I don't want to sit around with felons, you know, even if it is in the House of Lords. So I wish I knew what I could do to help the situation at the moment. But what nobody remembers is that I actually, years ago, I did 4 party political broadcasts for the SDP and then for the Lib Dems about proportional representation. And I think the starting point is, first of all, to clean up the press with Leveson too, and the second is to have proportional representation. I think that will begin to give us a more decent country. But right at the moment, I do go on about it at the moment, because I just want people to realize just how bad the newspapers are. Andrew Neil just started GB News. When he was in charge of the Sunday Times, the first thing he did is he said, we're only going to do interviews from now on that are spiky. In other words, that are sort of a bit negative and a bit critical and a bit snide. He made a decision as the editor of the newspaper to make interviews like that, regardless of whether they reflected the truth. Can you believe that? And then John Whittingdale, I think his name is, or some name like that, who was running the Sunday Times later on, Witherow. And my friend Michael Palin used to write the Winners' Dinners, the things about restaurants. And when he renewed Michael's contract to go on doing it another 2 or 3 years, he said to Michael, but make the reviews of the restaurants more attacking, because our readers like that. So restaurants got criticized, not because it was appropriate or fair, but because that was what the editor had decided the readers wanted. I mean, this is, you know, this is Mickey Mouse stuff. So we have to clean up the newspapers, and then we'll get better people going into Parliament, because at the moment, the only people who are going into Parliament have kind of got an axe to grind. They're not going in to try and do something better for the country. You know, they're all special interest groups. That's enough of that. Another question.
Well, thank you very much for your question. I do believe we've got one there at the back. Our boom mic is sliding in now. Not in the eye.
Yep.
And there we go.
Hi. You spoke beautifully before about the proprietor of the hotel that Basil Fawlty was based on. Did he ever recognise himself in the TV show?
Oh, what a good question. What a good question. No, because when we went down to make the program, we discovered that he'd sold the hotel up and had gone to retire in Miami. And it was run by a rather nice, well-mannered, competent guy, which is a huge disappointment because I thought I was going to be able to show the director and the art director the real Basil Fawlty. But what was kind of funny was that when he died, his wife spoke to a local Torquay newspaper, and it got reprinted all over England. She said that the character of Basil Fawlty was a travesty of my husband. He was a war hero. He was in the catering corps, incidentally. He was a war hero and an English gentleman, and Basil Fawlty was nothing like him at all. And then the letters started pouring into the newspapers, not just from guests, but from former employees saying, no, he was exactly like me. It's very strange. And then I was asked to be in Rat Race, one of these extraordinary coincidences. And, I can't be bothered to tell you that one. Let's have another.
Thank you very much for your question. Any more, guys? Any more, please? There we go. This one there at the back.
Hello. Going back to Mr. Andrew Cusack, how many times did you actually slap him in the head in real life by accident? Or did you actually...
How many times did you slap Andrew Sachs in the head?
On the head?
Question. Literally, how many times and all the takes did you beat up Andrew Sachs?
On the take. We never bothered to do it in rehearsal because it wasn't neat. You slap someone, it hurts slightly. But people went on about it. Andrew used to go on about it. I thought it was a bit wet, really. I mean, if you play soccer, you're going to get kicked now and again. If you do slapstick comedy, you're going to get hit now and again. I got hit a few times. I mean, the worst time was when I swatted him with a saucepan, and I was trying to make it a glancing blow. And as I was starting the blow, he sat up, which was not a smart thing to do. And he had a headache for a fortnight. But if you do this kind of comedy, you've got to go for it. I mean, when in Fish Called Wanda, there was a scene where Kevin Kline had to hit me when I had a coat over my head. And of course, because of that, I couldn't see what was happening each time. But I just had a feeling when the director said, "That's it, we've got it." And I said to the first assistant director, whom I knew well, I said, was that all right? He said, he didn't really go for it. So we did it again, and he really hit me. And of course, I had a rugby scrum hat on under the coat. Do you see what I mean? So he hit me unbelievably hard, and it was terribly funny. But if the audience can see that you're holding back and not doing it genuinely, then the humor just goes like that. And people don't understand that if you're doing slapstick, you've got to go for it.
Do you think that's what an issue with current slapstick, that they don't generally just go for it? Everything's held back.
Well, I think, yes, I think the effect, I just wrote a book on creativity, which you will not have heard of because the British press are boycotting it. But one of the things the key to good art is creativity, spontaneity, and you cannot be spontaneous if you're thinking before you say something, is this going to offend anyone? It's got to be spontaneous. And if you have a group of people together, until they relax and enjoy each other, if they're throwing ideas out, until they relax and say the first thing that comes into their head, nothing good will emerge. So there's got to be that trust to the group, so people think everybody's in here, we're all being silly, nobody's trying to impress anyone. That's when it happens. But if you have the people there who are trying to impress other people, then the creativity won't be there. It's got to be spontaneous, and you can't do that if you worry whether people are going to complain or not.
Well, now we're a nice little family in here. Has anybody else got any other spontaneous questions? Right there. Right, where are we going? Bring it on down. Good. So there we go. We'll circle it on around our
gentleman over there in dark green.
Perfect. We will slide it on over. But a young lady right here has got a mic
John,
right in her face.
If
There.
there's any of anyone else's work that you've seen and you thought, oh, I wish I had written that.
Yes, yes. Lots of them, but a lot of them were when I was starting. And I was lucky enough to discover people like Buster Keaton. I mean, the first time I discovered Buster Keaton, I couldn't believe it. And there's this huge reservoir of work that he did. I mean, I grew up on Laurel and Hardy, who were wonderful. They're just extraordinary. And I grew up on Chaplin at a time when he was very, very, very much admired. And then I discovered people. I discovered Harold Lloyd, you know, and then I'd already discovered The Goon Show and Tony Hancock, who were wonderful. And then there were records coming from America. In those days, that was all there was. There weren't videos, but there were records of Shelley Berman and Mike Nichols and Elaine May, which are just wonderful. And then, of course, my great hero, Peter Cook. I started looking at Peter Cook's stuff and listening to his stuff on record, and I would listen to some of his sketches over and over again and then try to rewrite them from memory till I started to see, oh, that line has to go before that one. You see what I mean? So there were a massive number of people, but in recent years, not so much. I'm a huge fan. I like Michael McIntyre a lot. I'm a huge fan of Eddie Izzard, who I think is wonderful. I always loved Steve Martin. We showed him an early cut of Fish Called Wanda, and he gave me the best set of notes from memory that I've ever had in my life. But there's not too many people now, because most of the American films, I don't watch television much, most of the American films are aimed at what I would call the hangover audience, you know, which is about sex, drugs, gambling, celebrity, you know what I mean? The sort of things that the average young American male can understand because he knows about them. As if you start making jokes like I would make in a film about 1776 and a half, people wouldn't know enough about it for you to be able to make fun of it. You see what I mean? The people who like Life of Brian best were the people who had some knowledge of the Bible. So the big thing now is films have become so expensive. How can you make a little film that's worthwhile? But it's not never going to make you money, but it may make a film that makes some people really love it. Okay.
Beautiful.
Gentleman with the, can you shout?
I can come in to you if you'd like. Yeah. There we go. The boom mic is on its way.
It's on its way.
Are we ready? I need a massive round of applause as soon as that mic hits your mouth. Are you ready? 3, 2, 1. Yay! There we go.
Thank you for coming. It's a pleasure to meet you.
Oh, I'm being paid. Don't worry.
Well,
no.
Either way, I just wanted to be polite. I just wanted to ask, on looking back on your career, is there anything that you would have done different? And if you didn't choose the course or path that you went, what would you have chose? And do you have any life experience advice?
Well, I've often wondered. I think I could have been very happy doing almost any job working with animals. Every time I get to a zoo, I kind of feel, I mean, a proper conservation zoo, I kind of think this is the most wonderful community. And of course, it's a community where no one is the slightest bit interested in earning money, which is interesting. I mean, those people do it out of pure love, and they're the happiest people I've ever come across. But I think that's something. Now, remind me of the question again. Oh, yeah. I think I would not have cast the same people in Fierce Creatures because people thought it was a sequel or related to the first film, and it was entirely different. I was trying to make a movie that parents could take to the kids together and laugh together, which Wanda wasn't. It was much too black. And I think the great mistake was to have cast them like that. I regret very much 2 or 3 roles I wasn't able to do. My friend Frank Oz, he's a wonderful director. He was the number 2 at the Muppets with Jim Henson. And he asked me to be in Dirty Rotten Scoundrels. And my second marriage was in a mess. I said, Frank, I've got to figure out whether I'm married or not. And by the time I found out, which was about 10 days later, they'd offered the part to someone else. That I missed. And Mike Nichols asked me to be in Birdcage. And I'm very sorry I didn't do that. And Mike Nichols also asked me to be in Remains of the Day. And I'm sorry I didn't do that, but I liked the script. And then Harold Pinter came along and took all the jokes out. And there was so much humor in the original book that I was amazed that that had gone, so I passed on that. But I regret those, because if I'd done them, it would have led to other acting work. And also to straight acting, which is, of course, as you probably realize, much, much easier than comedy acting. And people are always surprised at this, but if you find an actor or an actress, oh no, you're not allowed to say that, are you? If you find a person who acts of either sex, in as much as sexes are actually defined anymore, but where do you start? What was I talking about? I can't remember what I was saying.
You were spouting some beautiful prose. It was coming out gorgeously.
Was it? What was I talking about? I can't remember. Can you?
Serious acting.
Oh, serious acting. Yes, if you can't find an actor or actress who is really good at dramatic acting and really good at comedy acting, and ask them which is the harder, they will all tell you comedy. I mean, in ordinary acting, you just have to be real. You have to be believable. And by the time you go from that to comedy acting, you have masses of technique just to do with comedy, not least to do with the fact that you've got to deal with the audience laugh. Straight actors playing Hamlet, this is not a problem. You know, don't have to figure out where are the big laughs here. You know, when he stabs Polonius behind the arras, we got to get a laugh there. You don't have to bother with that with drama. That makes it all much simpler. So yes, there's a lot of things I regret. And I regret some of the people I killed. Well, people say that as you get older, you only regret what you didn't do. You never regret what you did do. But I did murder several people, and in retrospect, I regret that.
We love that. Thank you very much. Round of applause
Thank
for
you.
all our wonderful questions. We love to come things full circle. So you started at Cambridge with Graham Chapman, writing for 1948 show, Frost Report, Monty Python. What would you think that Graham would think of all of this? Bringing everything full circle.
He would have enjoyed it, you know. He was very naughty. He had a pub in Hampstead or Highgate that he used to go into, and it was very much his pub. And he got in an argument with a man at a table once, and he got up, walked over to the table, picked up the guy's drink, unzipped himself, and put his willy in the guy's drink. You know, any of you ever seen that happen?
You've not been to Manchester before.
He was a real one-off, and I used to love him. He was once asked to go to Oxford Union to speak on a debate on nuclear disarmament, and they had people there from the cabinet and from the armed forces, and Graham turned up dressed as a carrot. He had a carrot costume, sort of orange bodysuit and a little sprig hat, something like that. When he had to get up to speak, he got up and refused to say a word. He was supposed to speak for 12 minutes. He said nothing for 12 minutes. There was nothing they could do because it was one of the rules. People were shouting at him, and then he sat down again, you know. Really pleased that he'd fucked up the whole debate. You know. He was great. Go on.
We love coming full circle. So from Graham, you famously gave a very, very ballsy eulogy.
Yes, I did. I didn't know what to say, but I was very naughty at the funeral.
And for anyone that has yet to check it out, head over to YouTube, find it, take some time out.
Yes, people love it. We show it. And the other thing we show, which was very funny, was that after Gray died, we didn't do anything for 10 years because we weren't Monty Python anymore. And we were invited to the Aspen Comedy Festival in 1999, 10 years after Gray's death, and we thought it'd be nice to go. What do we do about Gray? And somebody said, well, we'll take a plywood cutout of him. And then somebody had a great idea, and we rang up his boyfriend, David Sherlock. We said, David, we're going to do a show at Aspen. Can we take Graham's ashes with us? And he said, that's wonderful. Graham would love that. So we took the ashes across and we put it on the table there. And after we'd been going for about 10 minutes, Terry Gilliam stretched his legs and kicked the ashes. I've never heard laughter like it. You've got to find that on the internet too. I mean, people sob with laughter when we show them that. It was, yeah, it was funny. And now, you see, we kind of drifted off. I mean, Michael makes the travel programs, and Eric is very strong with music and lyrics, so he's done Spam a lot. Terry Gilliam does very spectacular movies. And I do anything I can. Right at the moment, I'm writing for a film, a light comedy about cannibalism, which has not been done before, or at least not as a comedy, And I like the title. The title is Yummy. And I'm trying to turn Life of Brian into a stage show, and I'm also trying to do a musical, as I think I mentioned, A Fish Called Wanda. So I'm quite busy because I'm doing projects I like now, because so much of my life, of course, you know, we all have to do things that are boring for money, right? And then occasionally you get to do things you really love, and that's when you're lucky, which is where I am now.
We love that. We love that. So to close things off, seeing as you gave the most amazing eulogy for Graham, how would you like to be eulogized when the time comes?
Oh, hugely. Hugely. I have a funeral in Westminster Cathedral, all that kind of gun carriages down the mall, you know. I'm very tempted to stage my own death. I think it would be terribly funny to have Michael Palin doing the eulogy, and then from the coffin you hear. I think that could be one of the great moments in world comedy. Don't you? Everybody going, what's that knocking? I might pull it off, so don't tell the press. All right. Hello.
We love that. We love that.
Lady there. Well, it's not really that. It's just that I've noticed over the years that if you make jokes about things that are slightly taboo, you get bigger laughs. That's why comedians will very usually tell sex jokes, because sex still produces a tiny little shiver of anxiety. You know, where's this going to go? And if you can do a good joke about sex or anything else like violence, like think of the Black Knight in Holy Grail having all his limbs chopped off, you know. People get hysterical watching. There's a man having his limbs chopped off. They think it's really funny, you know. So if you can get it right, or killing the dogs, you know. I killed 3 dogs in Fish Called Wanda, you know. Where the car ran over one, a big dog ate another, and we dropped a concrete block on the third, you know. And I've seen people with tears rolling down their face at these dogs being killed. Mind you, I realized why they were able to laugh, because the dogs were Yorkshire Terriers, you know. I mean, if they'd been Labradors, I wouldn't be here today. But if you can get into these areas where there's anxiety and you can make them work, then you get bigger laughs than you do if you're just making jokes about price of fish. You see what I mean? So I'm always drawn to those sort of subjects, because I've always realized that it is much harder to be very funny than it is to be very clever. Being very clever is not that hard. Being very funny is. Got it. The rudest joke. I'll tell you the most awful one. It's about Graham Chapman. All right? We'll close on this one. It's really dreadful. we were asked by some Germans to go to Munich in '71 to make a show there, and we eventually made it in German. But they said to us, well, come on over, come and look at all the possible locations. So when we got on the plane and arrived there, it was lovely in Munich. They had a little pom-pom-pom-pom band waiting for us. And then they said, all right, we go back to the hotel now, and please just a quick wash and brush up this, because then we go to Dachau. Silence. You see the silence there? Isn't that wonderful? You see everybody got anxious for a moment. You say, Dachau. There's potential laughter here. So we said, today we're going to Dachau. Yes, they said, yes, we go in 10 minutes, please, when you're ready. So we all got ready, and we drove off to Dachau, and we sat there in the big limo, and somebody came along and said, we're terribly embarrassed. We've got this wrong. This is one of the guys working on the film with us. He said, today is early closing day in Dachau, which we thought was slightly funny, but you know, but you didn't think it was funny. And he says, it's now closed, and it is not possible for you to go in today. So we come back, and Graham Chapman shouted, tell them we're Jews.
Round of applause. So, ladies and gentlemen, it brings to an epic conclusion an unforgettable evening with the one and only comedy legend and national treasure. Please give it up for John Cleese.
Thank you, Manchester.
An absolute pleasure, good sir. Thank you. Now, before we go into our next part of the show, which is our photo opportunities and autograph signing, as well as a VIP meet and greet, there are still tickets available if you want to head over towards our desk at the back. Madeline will sort you all out with your tickets for that. There's still a few available. Get them in. However, as we announced at the beginning of the show, we are going to do a brief little snippet for our amazing new studio that we have here. So please feel free. Sit back, relax. When we got the thumbs up that the cameras are all rolling, we'll give a nice little plug as John is sat on stage, and then we can get everything underway here with our Record X studio crew at the back. Guys, if you'd like to change our screen, we will crack on with this. There we go.